me and my wife moved to the area, 10, 11 years ago, and we've been coming ever since. We were trying to find a church in the area. This was the first church we came to, and we never looked anywhere else.
Fab.
So probably 11 years now, I'd say.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so James has actually got a bit of a background. I say a bit of a background. He's got a lot of a background in science, but I'm not going to explain that. I just want James to kind of introduce himself on that front and just what he does with science.
Right. So when I was about, a long time ago now, when I was picking GCSEs, I had really no kind of idea what I wanted to do. I enjoyed science and I was relatively good at it. So I thought I'd do chemistry and physics at A level. And then I did all right at that. And then I decided I'm going to go and do a chemistry degree. So I went off to Cardiff University to study chemistry. And then, to be honest, I didn't want to get a job at the end of my degree. And my supervisor, who I was doing my research project for, said, would you like to stay and be a student for another 4 years and be paid for it? Well, that was a bit of a no-brainer to say yes to that. And it was fascinating stuff what we were doing. So I decided to stay on and do a PhD in chemistry. So the research that we were doing was trying to make different materials to try and store hydrogen, with like hydrogen cars and all that kind of stuff. Big money in that, actually. If you can crack the hydrogen storage problem, you will make a lot of money. We didn't quite manage it. It's still ongoing. But I'm
going to put that on my to-do list. I'm going to solve that tomorrow.
Yeah. And also looking at materials that would capture carbon dioxide as well. So we're all aware of how big a deal carbon dioxide is in terms of greenhouse gases. We were trying to make plastics that could actually absorb carbon dioxide selectively. So you can imagine a power plant giving off all these nasty gases, and you could actually trap the CO2 before it even gets out into the atmosphere, and then you could dispose of it. So that's what I was doing for 3 or 4 years at Cardiff, doing my research. But while I was doing that, I did a bit of teaching as well with the students, and I really enjoyed teaching. So I decided to go and do a PGCE afterwards. So that's my 3rd degree at this stage. And I've been teaching ever since, and I'm now down the road at Neath College teaching A-level chemistry there.
So you might see him. If you see him, just give him a wave. He is lovely. You will come to find. Fab, James. So I just got a couple of questions here, if you wouldn't mind me asking. So I know that you studied theology and that you've actually graduated recently. So can you just give us a little bit of background on what theology is, just for people who may not know?
So, theology is trying to actually understand what the Bible tells us, basically, what the Bible is all about, but actually studying it. The course was actually studying the Bible, but in an academic way, in the same way you might study history in an academic way, and actually sort of putting the claims of the Bible to an academic test. Do they hold up? So it was really fascinating as a Christian, and also as someone who's a scientist, to actually look at the Bible in this kind of slightly different way, I suppose, in a more formal sort of way where, there would be non-Christians studying this course as well, and they would be looking at the Bible in the same way. And it was just really interesting to see how well the Bible holds up when it's put under that kind of scrutiny. It does stand the test of academic scrutiny.
So on that then, do you find then that as a scientist, obviously having studied theology, because theology isn't just like a kind of basic level, is it? You go deep into it, you go deep into the whole thing. But did you find that there were some like theological perspectives that were clashing with what you studied in science? As a scientist and a Christian, did you find that those two things just continue to clash?
I think there is a natural clash that people think is a clash. We look at things like creation and science in terms of the Big Bang and evolution, and we feel that those two can't marry up together. And I think the problem is that we're actually approaching it in completely the wrong way. We're trying to take these scientific theories that are in place and then either trying to fit God around them or deciding that God doesn't actually fit into the equation with it. Whereas actually what I find is if we take God as the center at the beginning and then put everything else around that, it works so much better. So I think we're tackling it in the wrong way. I believe that there is a creator God. And in one sense, I don't really mind if you think we have a young earth or an old earth. That's not the point. The point is that I believe that there is a creator God, that we are not here by random chance. Because if we just take the idea of a Big Bang and then evolution and it's all completely random, there is absolutely no purpose to life. We are here by sheer chance. We live our however many years, and then we return to the dust from which we came. That's what science would teach us in that sense, that there would actually be no purpose to life. Whereas the Bible tells us is that we are lovingly made by a creator God that wants a relationship with us. And when we look up at the creation that is around us, we see the beauty and we see the complexity that is in this world around us, for me, it just points us to the idea that there must have been a creator. There is just so much beauty, so much complexity in everything that is around us. I mean, I always think of the human eyeball, which is one of the most incredibly complicated parts of the human body. And there are something like 137 million specialized cells working just in the retina, sending images to the brain so that we can see. The odds of something as complex as a human eyeball kind of evolving by random chance as to what it is now are just so small. I would say I discount it. It's just so small. You know, for me, there has to be a creator.
Okay, so one thing that I think a lot of Christians sort of deal with, but also a lot of Christian scientists as well, is do you find that there are any contradictions in the Bible? Like one thing saying one thing and then another thing contradicting what it's just said. Do you find that there's a lot of that in the Bible?
Where people find this is where they're perhaps not reading the Bible right, where they're sort of skim reading certain chapters, where they're taking isolated verses on their own, not seeing them in the true context in which they were originally written. And I think if we study our Bibles properly and we read it, we actually see that everything does marry up perfectly. You know, it is
like reading between the lines.
Yeah. We're going to be in danger if we just take random passages from all over the Bible and then try and say, actually, well, this contradicts this and this contradicts this. You might find bits like that, but actually, if you take them in the original context they were meant to be written and you see it in the Bible as a whole rather than isolated passages, then I don't see there's contradictions at all.
And I suppose with the Bible as well, it's a historical thing, isn't it? And so it wasn't written in our culture. Yes. And so there are things that we read as Christians and it's like, the heck does that mean? What's the significance of that? And then that can almost kind of fall into a contradiction because it's like, well, I don't understand it.
We have to get ourselves back into the kind of the world that the Bible was written in. You know, the Bible was written over thousands of years period, and we have to get into our heads into the mindset of what it would have been like to have been there at the time. And when we were studying the Bible in the theology course, what I found really fascinating, and you might not find this very fascinating at all, but we were looking at things like authorship of the different books, so who wrote them, and actually looking at sort of the original authors, trying to get into that kind of level of detail. When were they written? And actually, you start to see then, actually, this book was written in a real world, and it's just full of incredible truth. And I actually found looking at those kind of issues really helpful in trying to see how credible the Bible actually is.
Okay, so last question then. As a scientist, what does your faith mean to you? What does your Christian faith mean to you?
Well, as a scientist who is also a Christian, I mean, when I look out around at the world around us, when I wake up each morning and I look up into the sky and I see the beauty in the forest and all that kind of stuff, it just reminds me that we are not here by chance, that I am created by a God who loves me, who wants a relationship with me, and a God who was willing to die to restore that relationship with him. And as a scientist, you know, I look all around and it's just pointing us, it's just incredible volume of evidence that's pointing us back to God. So I rejoice when I wake up each morning and I look around at the world, when I look at my science textbooks with all the complexity of the equations and all that kind of stuff, because it just tells us how complex and how beautiful everything is. And for me, it can only point us to a God. And the Bible tells us that we have a God who wants that relationship with us. It's a God that wants a relationship with every single one in this room, not just with me. And a God who is willing to die to try and restore that relationship with us.
Thanks, James. James, everyone. James is going to be hanging around for a little bit, so if you wanted to ask him any more questions, I'm sure he'd be happy to talk some science stuff with you. I'm sure. I'm assuming he's a lovely guy. He doesn't bite. He's really cool. So if you wanted to go on to him afterwards, he'd be more than happy to go a bit deeper than what we just did here.
We've got about 10-15 minutes. What I didn't have time for this morning was not this morning, is it? It's evening.
This morning.
I've been here a long time. No, we didn't have time to look at things like evolution, the Big Bang in any kind of great detail. Maybe that will be a great discussion for another time to actually delve into those things and take them apart a little bit. But if you want to chat about that in the interval, that would be amazing.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much, James. James, everyone. Thanks, James.